Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. And our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about what we want to talk about. So we're going to look back at what we did over the last year and then look forward and decide what we want to do next. And really, this is really up to you. This is a huge cheat sheet that is really important to us because it is really how we figure out how to put many of these things in so that we don't get to everything every quarter when we do these, but it's usually because of some logistical, like where do we find the expert and who does it, but suggesting it really, really helps us. So if you have ideas about what you'd like to talk about today is about infrastructure, so it's IT, production infrastructure, those types of things. If there are things that you'd like us to cover, think about those and put those in, tag those as second questions in Makana, second hour questions in Makana so that you can make them suggestions. They don't have to be questions because we're not answering questions today in the second hour. We will in the first hour. But in the second hour, we're really going to be taking your suggestions. So if you can throw those in there either now or in the second hour, it's great. If you're not in Makana, go ahead and throw your questions into into our askofficehours.global. Just go to askofficehours.global and you can put those in 24/7. The show doesn't even have to be running. And you can just throw them in. So go ahead and throw them into there at askofficehours.global. And let's go ahead and jump into the questions. CJ, what do we have?
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. I have several of the older Blackmagic Ultra Studio Mini recorders with T1 connectors. Is there any way to get those to work with the current Mac OS? Thanks.
Go ahead, Ron.
I think it means Thunderbolt 1.
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah. We have many of those as well in our studio. I have not managed to find a solution yet. I've tested everything.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. Like I can't get it. I think it's just too complex of a connection. I've definitely gone from those Thunderbolt 1s to the USB-Cs and all the other in-betweens, and they don't show up. You either need a computer that's still using that older Thunderbolt, or they, I sell them to somebody for $10 on eBay, but they're probably not valuable to most folks. I can't get them to work either. Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. What combination of technologies is in play to have this person walk around the map? Does the effect work for you? There's some YouTube links.
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
There's definitely, you saw the second YouTube link. I didn't see that. You had that in the question, but basically they've got about 16 cameras running around in a I call an infinity green screen where they use I saw one at NAB, a company called ProSic, CYC. ProSic, yeah. And
they don't.
They basically had that, and they brought in the cameras, and they showed this person walk around doing the exact same thing that had objects coming up in front of them, objects coming up behind them. Even the screens behind them were completely fabricated.
Yeah, ProSic makes the green screens. They don't make the software. So ProSic is they're out of, I think, Portland, and they make the part of the technologies that come together is exactly what Jeffrey lined up. ProSic is kind of the standard for, I want to build a green screen cyc with a perfect curve on it. ProSic is the place you go to do that. so they build the green screen backgrounds. We actually, when I went to Rwanda, we just bought some ProSic stuff. I didn't want anyone to figure it out, and we just put them on the walls, and it's the best green screen in the whole country. So anyway, that's what ProSic does. Most of these weather technologies, I don't know which vendors they're using here, but most of it's coming out of Unreal Engine. So Unreal went through a lot of trouble to be able to handle, to be able to output in 2997, 5994, interlay, so on and so forth, so that they could be used in broadcast. This is something that Unity decided not to invest time and effort into. So as a result, almost all of these systems are all running on top of an Unreal Engine backend. And so they're building their own custom version of that. But what you're really looking at typically there is Unreal Engine, and it's really impressive. The Weather Channel's been doing this for maybe 5 years or so, and it's 5 or 6 years, and it keeps getting better, as the technology goes up. The thing you want to look at a lot of these where it doesn't do as well is high contrast surfaces at an angle or a curve. You might see a little bit of aliasing along it. That's typical because of the real-time rendering. We haven't gotten to a point where the hardware can oversample in real time effectively. So to get rid of that, what it really needs to do is render it 2x or 4x the delivery resolution and then bring it back down again. And that round trip isn't quite ready yet. So anyway, so you still see a little bit of aliasing in a lot of the stuff, but outside of that, it's a pretty impressive solution. Next question.
Mathieu LeCount in Oakland. I have a 2-day show coming up, need 2 large monitors for iMag, and renting is as expensive as buying 2 cheaper ones. Recommendation for 55 to 77-inch sub $1,000 monitors.
Renting is really expensive at that size. So, I mean, if when you get over that, the solutions get so small and so expensive, it's not that big of a deal to rent do it. But you're absolutely right. A lot of the reason is because a lot of people break them a lot. So they're taking into account that they may not get that monitor back to do that. Also, what you rent is typically a little bit beefier than what you're going to buy at that price. So you'll have more controls. You'll have oftentimes better exposure controls and so on and so forth with some of the solutions there. I will say that at that size, I typically buy them. So if I'm looking at that they have gotten. You can get up to 85 inches for under $1,000. TCL will make those. For iMag, I would say that it probably doesn't matter. So, I mean, the iMag quality is, I mean, any TV that they're selling at Best Buy is probably going to be at the same quality as iMag. Engineers will probably argue with me about that, but the color's all over the place for iMag stuff. You can, I mean, definitely if you throw something that's going to, I would recommend thinking about it, some kind of calibration unit. So you want to, be able to calibrate them to some known thing, but you're going to find that they're all probably going to work. Now, it depends on how long they'll work. That's the big thing is if you decided I only need to use it once and it's paid itself off, you'll be able to use it a couple times before wear and tear of moving it around will tear it, will slowly beat it into the ground because these consumer TVs are not built to be set up, plugged in, taken down, set up, plugged in, taken down. So that's where you really start to keep the box, by the way. If you're not going to buy a good case for it, make sure to keep the box because that's going to definitely extend its lifetime there. So TCL makes some. There's the other one is we bought a lot of Samsung, so we kind of standardized on 55-inch Samsungs. They were like $450, and I think they're now in the high 300s. And that's for our back end. That's what we use for everything. Is 55-inch. I would recommend picking one. So by picking a Samsung that we liked and using it for everything, it meant that we didn't have to keep figuring it out what we were going to do. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I should also say that this is one of those examples where you really have to think about the true cost of ownership. What do they say? Cost TCO. Because once you've purchased it, now you have to store it someplace, and you may not have a place. I mean, Alex will tell you about his big giant warehouse that he used to have.
I have
gear, yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I actually have right now I have a garage full of monitors because I got to put them somewhere. They were too fragile for us to put into storage, and so they're all sitting there. Yeah.
So that's part of that cost of ownership. So it may actually, in the long run, be actually cheaper to rent it. Just so it's not that you're renting the monitor; it's just you're paying to get rid of it at the end of the event. I know that when we shut down our office, I guess it's about 1.5 years ago now. We ended up, I mean, I have a whole slew of, friends and employees that all have old monitors from the office because it was like, I don't just we were literally just giving them away. Like, you could take the 65, you could take the 70, we were just giving away stuff because we didn't want to store it.
You're good, Ronnie.
Yeah, and then you need the stands or the Visa mounts, and then you need the flight cases, and then you need wheel on the flight cases, and distribution and SDI cables and HDMI converters, etc. So it adds up. It's not only the cost of the display. And then you destroy one of your colleagues does ask me how I know. And that was that $1,000 out the window. So, I mean,
while there was a cost to storing all that stuff, there was also an advantage in the sense that we were able to kind of build up ideas. We were able to build up ideas. We were also able to get aggressive. And the reality is that a huge part of our margin over time was the equipment. So this is for PixelCore. We don't have as much equipment for Ono. With PixelCore, oftentimes half of the margin that we had was related to the rental of the gear, because clients would push you back and forth over how much you're charging for pre-pro or whatever, but the equipment is the equipment, and you're going to rent it from us or you're going to rent it from somebody else. And so it was just kind of like, oh, well, that's the cost. And we would pay those things off. If we did it market rate, you would market rate for rental was 1/10 typically for electronics, or 1/50th for hard stuff like C stands and stuff like that. And so we, in 10 shows, we'd pay the thing off, and then after that it was just making us money. And then and so the thing is that now it doesn't work when you're doing one show a month. Like, that doesn't work. We had gear on the ground 2 to 3 times a week. So at that rate, it made a lot of sense for us to own all that equipment. But as soon as that rate dropped, then it didn't make any sense. so that's the challenge that you have. But it's hard for me when I work, because the business model that I'm in currently is more of a rental situation. And to me, renting gear after you owned it for years is like flushing money into a hole. Like you're just like, wow, like, because that's all money I used to keep. And so that's hard too. Yeah, go to Chris.
Yeah, and back to the storage thing. Storing gear is kind of like a pharmaceutical making pills. Like the first pill costs hundreds of millions of dollars to figure out how to make it, and then they just copy paste, and they make billions of them. Storing, the first time you have to rent or buy a warehouse to put something in it to store that first monitor, that's really expensive. Now you get to amortize that storage space because you could put more than one monitor in that warehouse.
Well, and you don't usually start, our progression was slow too, so we had some stuff kind of like starting to fill up the area in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And
stage one is all the hallways are filled with gear.
I had this little storage area that was by my office that would kind of pile everything up into when we did the shows. And then we turned a hallway into a storage area, put shelves down the hallway so we could keep things that were there. Then when we moved to up to Petaluma, we took over part of the basement for the brick house, for Leo's brick house, and then we fenced it in and put a bunch of shelves in there, and then that's what we had there. But we slowly took over almost the entire basement. I mean, poor Leo. Like, we're just like this uncontrollable plant. And then we ended up, then when we moved to down to San Rafael, and then we had 5,000 square feet, and we filled that up. And then we had 10,000 square feet. We filled that up, and so with stuff. Now, that, when I say filled that up, we had a full-on workshop, so wood and metal workshop. We had we had 2 trucks that had 2 of the Ford Transits that are high and long. So we had 2 of those that pulled in. We had a whole trailer, a 24-foot trailer that was a production trailer that would roll in. So when we say that we had we filled it up, it wasn't just with little monitors. It was with a lot of gear in there. But it was great to have. And again, if we were able to maintain the volume that we were doing, it would have been great. It just, at the time, the volume slowed down a little bit. And then it doesn't make any sense really fast. That's the hard part. So you have to be very careful about your cash flow. Next question.
Jesse Kester from Glendale. As a media production company in LA, we can do the job, but we're having trouble getting the job. We have a bit of budget to hire a producer or sales agent in 24. What are your tips? Sourcing talent, salary and commission, work from home and office?
I have never hired a salesperson, so I don't know that. I don't know that answer, but Chris does. Chris knows all the answers.
Well, I have all the answers to all the questions all the time. Here's what I would recommend, Jesse. You want to... I need a prop. Hold on. I got to reach for a prop.
He's going for a prop. He's looking around.
Do you have a sales guy in your... Oh, never.
You want to be able to take your wallet, hand it to that person, and say, do whatever you have to do. If you can't trust the person with your wallet, you probably don't want to be in business with them. That's my recommendation. And there are people, they're few and far between, and when you find them, you give them whatever they want. But there are people that are uniquely qualified and skilled at peopling. I call it peopling. You have to be able to entertain people. You have to be able to placate people. You have to be able to, make them happy. I'm not good at that. None of us are good at that. That's why we're here talking to each other, because we have no other friends, right? So it is a real problem in this business. Yes, we are all good at doing the job, but getting the job is the hard thing. But when you find that person, banana for scale, you give them whatever they want and make sure that you're comfortable handing them, your wallet.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I've had with sales is that it's hard to get a salesperson that actually knows what you're doing and how it's done. And it's really easy for them to get you a job that you can't do. That's the problem. Is I know you can do the job, but can you get, you're kind of in this reversal. But the problem is you get salespeople who will say, well, we'll do this. They'll promise the client the moon because they're trying to close the deal. Right. And they bring it back to you and you're like, that is not going to work. Like, I can't do that. It
can't be just a salesperson. It has to have somebody with production background who's good at schmoozing the client. It's super unique.
Yeah, it's really hard to do. I have found it easier to do things like this, talk to people and go to events and speak and all those other things that get me in, tied in with the rest of the community by serving it. And then I don't really try to sell. Things generally just kind of pop out, in that area. So, but I think getting involved with other folks is usually the way that I've handled it. I haven't really done it any other way. And I still have my own challenges, a lot of times the infrastructure or the size of the shows that I do are few, but big, and so that's a precarious place to be as well. Next question.
Zach Jeffers from the Pacific Northwest. We're going to be giving Unity Comms a try for the first time next month on a remote production with remote cam ops. Any tips, settings, headsets?
Good running.
I recommend using cellular instead of Wi-Fi if you are putting these on phones. Often you use the phones that the people have themselves in private possession. For headsets, we are using the Blue Parrot, which is called X450, B450 EX, with pretty good results. They are Bluetooth, so I highly recommend if you have something that is wired to the phone, that would be better.
Yeah, and turn up the latency if you're not going to be on a wired connection. Turn up your latency a little bit because that oftentimes is what people start breaking up. I think that's a big piece of that. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
For those people that aren't camera operators, the rest of us who sit down for a living, get people, learn how to set up your Stream Deck to run the Unity controls. I usually set up a button for each person on my crew so I can direct message or directly, isolated speak to individual people. And it's super handy. When I first figured out I could do that, I was like, oh, I'm totally comfortable here.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, I use the Stream Deck heavily with comms. I've had lunch with Tlaloc, and the Parrot headset that he has is on him all the time. It's basically his next ear, and it works fantastically well. In fact, I've never seen him without it on. So whatever one that one is, it is excellent.
Yeah, I think it's the Parrot 450 is the one that I've used, and I have used that for comms, and it works fairly well. I tend to I use my OpenComms, the OpenCom headsets, and the reason is because it's got the boom, but I also can put program in my ears, so I can actually listen to the comms and the show relatively well. So that is also something to think about when you're putting those together. The other thing to really think about is what you're going to do with all those PLs. So, building those out. If you've already done a lot of comms, then it shouldn't be a big deal. But really think about that structure. We usually have most of us that do comms, for anything, build up a spreadsheet, whether that's in Google Docs or elsewhere, that is like who gets what. And that's usually the very first thing to do as far as that goes. You may already know that, so I'm just saying that for everyone else listening, but really thinking through that rather than kind of putting it together. The other thing that we do with clients is, especially if we're doing things over and over again, is we try to get everybody on comms. We don't want them calling or texting us separately. We want them to talk to us on comms. Creating one of the things you want to look for is how many people are using something other than the system that you gave them, and try to ask them why. like not in an angry way, not with an angry voice, but a nice indoor voice. Like, hey, what's going on? And how can we help you here? Because you want to try to get everybody to use one form of communication most of the time. There's reasons not to text when you're in a place where you have to be quiet, that kind of thing. But you want to be careful of having it because clients especially will work around it pretty quickly because they're just not used to it. Even when we don't need them, we try to get them to use the comms. And the reason we do that is they slowly get used to it. For us, we had clients, whether it's using Agent IC or Unity, where they don't understand it and there's a lot of frustration and the first show is really hard. And then you've got 80% of the people have already installed it on their computer and they've already logged in. Now there's a couple new ones every single time. But the people sitting next to them in the company are going, oh, this is how you do this, blah, 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 blah. And before you know it, you have everybody on the system. So if you're doing things repeatedly, even if you don't think you need them, try to encourage people to use them to make that actually happen. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, in some U.S. news weather segments, forecasters compare the U.S. and European weather models. Would the EU weather agency send raw visual content to stations, or would the visuals be locally generated? Could SPX or a similar product do it?
I don't. SPX might be able to do something like that, but not at the level that we're used to at this point. These are really specialized systems. They're not getting graphics from the other side of the world. They're generating them on their own, and these systems are very expensive, and they are also very effective. I still haven't quite gotten my head around why people spend so much money on weather forecasting for TV. But it is something that there's a lot of money that goes into it, and so it's I guess it's a one place that you can put a lot of shiny things. I also don't know why people don't improve their green screens. We have a local TV network, a TV station that I don't think they've updated their green screen for 2 decades, and it shows. And so I'm surprised they don't kind of just at least moderately keep up with it. So, but yeah, this is all generated locally and it's all done from the raw data, not from something that is being generated and sent from one part of the world to the other. Next question.
Steve Uroff from Madison, Wisconsin. My office hours radio app tells me the beta has expired. Where in Discord or another resource can we obtain a current build from the QR code?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
On my version inside the test flight, it says update, so I just updated it and it started working again.
Yeah, I think it just ran out there. It is not. It's been re-updated, and you may even see a new logo. so we were working on that. So we're doing some final cleanup on it. We should be able to release it in the not too distant future, but it should work now. I think before the show we had over 50 downloads of it. So I think that it's working for somebody. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, one thing to check, Steve, is inside test flight in the app settings, also make sure you have that little checkbox for automatic updates. So it'll just update itself and you don't have to worry about it.
And for those of you listening who don't even know what we're talking about, there is if you're in Discord and you go up to the Alex announcements and scroll up, you'll see a link to a test flight for the beta of our radio app. And so the radio app lets you listen to the show live. It also lets you can ask questions through askofficehours.global, or you can actually log into Makana straight from that app. So that is a kind of an easy way for you to, if you don't need to watch it and you're just listening to it, it's a great, we mostly did it because we were providing the stream to the web. And the problem we had was that it was not very stable, coming through the web page. And so we started with that, and then it just kept on building from there. Juan is an amazing programmer and just keeps adding cool things to it. So anyway, it's in beta right now. If you're in Discord, you can go download it. Hopefully within this quarter, we will release it more widely. But I think it's a pretty great app to check out. Next question.
Next question from Ike Potter in Hanover, Germany. The new Canon R5C seems to be an interesting camera. Besides a micro HDMI out and only a 3.5mm mic in, thoughts?
Go, Jason.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been looking for a replacement to my long-used 6D Mark II that's directly behind me. Mostly because I don't want to have to replace all my glass, but I think I might have to go Sony. It may eventually have to happen. So yeah, it's a pretty good camera, and it's really, really hard to get a fantastic still camera for under $3-4 grand.
Yeah, it's a pretty it feels like a pretty risky thing to do. Is what Canon's done here, which is that they move their lens system. I mean, eventually you have to do that, I guess, but they're they're doing two things at the same time, which seemed like it was a little risky. Which is number one is that they changed the lens system, and the problem is there's often a joke that you date the body, the camera body, but you marry the lenses. Like when you start buying lenses, lens systems are very sensitive because that's where you're spending all your money. A lot of us will have a $3,000 camera, but $30,000 of lenses. And so the thing is that changing systems is a really, really risky thing to do. In addition to that, Canon chose to close down the lens, so you have to license it from them to actually build a lens for it. So Sigma and everyone else can't just build lenses for this. Doing both of those at the same time when they're not actually in a strong position, in my opinion, Canon's not in a particularly strong position in the market right now, and so this could be. I sometimes think that if I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if Canon drops out of the SLR market, I think we're going to look back at, hey, they changed the lens system, and then suddenly there was this huge drop off. And the problem is that Canon's doing something that makes it harder when the Sonys are arguably better cameras. That's the hard part, is that the Sony's is firing on all cylinders at the moment. I think Nikon has a lot of other places that it's doing things, and I think it still has some innovation there. But I think that the changing the lens and locking it down is a really risky move. It's and so I think that that's going to be the challenge. The one place that I think that the R5 does have is they have the stereo. I think that a lot of folks are kind of playing with is they have a stereo lens. This is the R5, the 5.2 millimeter. What do they call it here? The price has gone down too. That's often not a good sign, but they have it's a 2.8 dual 3D reality 180 degree VR lens that goes right on the R5. The R5 has an 8K sensor, and so you can record in stereo 180, which is going to be more and more valuable as Apple releases the Vision Pro, as well as Meta ramps up a lot of their support for things. People can decide what they think about the Vision Pro, but Apple's going to spend a lot of money on it. Apple already has spent a lot of money on it, and they're going to spend money on it for the next decade. So there's a market there. They're probably going to sell between 300,000 and 500,000 units. And people will say, well, that's not a very big market. My thing is how many times have you sold 300,000 of anything that you've built? Like probably not that often. If you sold 10,000, would it pay off? Yeah. And it's going to be a really small, there's not going to be a lot of competition. So there's a lot of opportunity in these headsets even at that size. So there's going to be, some significant opportunities. So I think that that's one place that it stands out. But the R5 is probably not, if I had the same amount of money right now, I'd probably be looking at a Sony product, if I was shooting stills. And video, there's a lot of things in that market. Next question.
From the QR code, Ananawahi Black Bear Marshall in Oahe, Smart Show is extending their December holiday sale into January due to huge popular demand, with 15% or more off their Award Pro 1. Should I buy one? Should I buy more? What else do I need?
Go ahead, Chris.
Alex, you kind of touched on this in the last question. You said something about, that maybe that's not a good thing that they raised or lowered the price. To a certain extent, I reject the premise of this question. Due to popular demand, they're extending the sale.
Yeah.
Sometimes when I see sales, and actually not sometimes, always, the two things that go through my head are, they have a warehouse full of these things they can't get rid of. Or, oh wow, business must be really bad. They're trying to drum up some revenue. And I realize that there's positive reasons for having sales and drawing attention and stuff, but I don't necessarily, and I'm sorry, I don't even know what this product is, but when I saw this, I was like, really? Is it popular demand that they're giving it away cheap? Or if it was super popular, wouldn't they just be charging book rate for it?
Yeah. It's a marketing term, a marketing attempt to drum up a little bit more business to get to go through that.
Somewhere out there is a Don Draper line explaining how this works out.
I looked at the website. I guess for me, I didn't understand why you wouldn't. There's so many products that do what they do. I didn't really understand why I would use theirs. I mean, it's a presentation tool like PowerPoint or Keynote. It's PC only, and it's a presentation tool, and it is. I don't know why I wouldn't just use PowerPoint for that, but I guess it probably costs less than PowerPoint if you don't already have Office 360. I always forget that as a Mac user, we get Keynote for free, and so you always look at these presentation tools on the PC, and you're like, why would you do that? Because you already have a presentation tool, but you don't. You may, this is probably less expensive than getting Microsoft Office, and so it could make sense if you want to do some more simple presentations and you don't have PowerPoint to do something like this. So, but I don't have any opinion about it because again, haven't used it before. Next question.
Alexander Knight from Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. I demoed the new Saramonic Y-Talk comms headsets. Having never used anything like this, it was jarring not hearing my own voice when talking. Is this typical?
Go ahead, Chris.
The side tone is what you're talking about, Alexander. That's usually a function of the hardware that the headset is plugged into. Is this some sort of like a wireless comm to,
like
headset to headset
It's
thing?
kind of like what Hollyland has built and some other ones where it's like it's a tiny little system that has just standalone headset that are all talking to each other, wireless, full duplex, 1.9 gig. So they're all.
They probably just kept the side tone circuitry out of it just to reduce cost. But I agree. I like hearing a little side tone.
I can't believe they wouldn't. And you're sure, Alex, that it wasn't an option to have side tone?
Not that I know of. So I asked my rep about this, and we were just testing it against each other. And the headset, it was jarring also because the headset has such a good seal. I couldn't hear myself, and I need to be able to hear myself. He didn't have an answer for that.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it seems very odd. Now, some people don't like it. You have to. Did you have a double muff? Were you using one over both ears?
I don't remember. It was a while ago.
So
it was a couple months
if it's
ago.
single muff, it's not as important because you can kind of hear yourself. You can hear yourself through the other ear. But when people put double muffs on, they're like, you can't hear yourself. You end up yelling.
I
That's
think that
the
was
problem.
the problem.
Yeah. So they have a single muff and a double muff that's there. It sounds like the seal is really good. And I think that there's a place where you could, for instance, potentially. The problem really, without having side tone. Now, what's interesting is almost everybody who starts with comms is completely taken aback by side tone. Like they just it totally jostles them to have side tone, to hear their voice for the first time. If you're not used to listening to your own voice, it's very distracting for folks. But once you get used to listening to side tone, it's kind of table stakes.
It's my favorite part about being
listen to yourself.
Just hearing myself. Yes, that's why I'm here, Alex.
It's just that it also tells you when your mic is opened, and it lets you know what you sound like to everybody else and everything else. It would be very hard for me to operate that way. Now, what you could do, and probably what the target market is for these, is giving these to camera ops. Camera ops, we prefer them not to talk. So except for like telling us like this isn't working or not working or whatever. Most of the time we ask camera ops just to talk with the camera, like just go back and forth or up and down, and occasionally they can talk there. But if it kept them from talking on the biggest problem we have with camera ops most of the time is them talking too much on the comms, usually not about the show. And so I think that and this is where a lot of these little less expensive headset systems go. Is I've got a 3-camera shoot for a small like nonprofit or industrial, and I just want to throw some headsets on so that I can talk to everyone. I will say that even if this is all you can afford, having comms versus not having comms, it's super useful to have comms. Like comms is half the show, and so definitely having them makes a difference. Go ahead, Jason.
My immediate thought when I saw that frequency range is, oh boy, that's at the very bottom of Wi-Fi. So I looked it up. 1.9 gigahertz is right around like old school cordless phones. My immediate thought is they better be locking those down. Well, 900 is gone, right? 900 now belongs to T-Mobile. So yeah, right at around 1.9, starting in 2005, is like cordless phones and whatever they're calling unlicensed personal communication devices. And I'm thinking, boy, I hope they have great signal hopping. And,
I mean,
wow.
typically, and I don't know for sure, it's cordless operations, but it's also typically DECT, DECT. And that is DECT, the DECT platform. So when you see 1.9, oftentimes that's using the DECT platform. And that is actually a pretty, it doesn't have a lot of congestion. You do have to make sure you know what country you're using them in, because they are a little bit sensitive to that. But that's like what the Shure microflexes are on DECT. The Free Speak from Clearcom are on DECT. So that platform is the 1.9 platform does that. I did ask Shure. I was like, they're really excited about that frequency. And I said, so do you ever have any trouble with it? And they were like, Plantronics. Like, you can't use our product in Plantronics. That didn't work at all. So anyway, so Plantronics uses it as well. And so yeah, you're right that there are some of those, there are some places where it won't work, but how many people use cordless phones anymore? Like, when you really think about it, I don't even know when I last saw one.
I haven't seen one in 10 years.
Hotels,
still.
By the way, hotels.
Yeah.
Hotels use those cordless phones, and it's usually the worst. Like, it would be much better. You always want the hotels to go back to wired, because it's got some like weird little button thing that you have to figure out how to click on. Yeah. All right, next question.
Tony Mobley from Noonan, Georgia. Alex, what is your opinion of the new James Burke connections?
It's pretty good. This is on the Curiosity Stream. It's obviously done at 1/10 the budget or 1/100th the budget that the original was done in. He's not going anywhere. He's not going to places. But what it makes up for, he's doing it obviously in front of green screen with some background. But what they make up with it is lots of little illustrative graphics that they add to what he's doing while he's talking. So he's going through explaining how certain things happened and so on and so forth. I mean, I can listen to James Burke talk about pretty much anything. I will let you know. I think he is a global treasure when it comes to understanding how to take something complex and turn it into a story that you can remember and that you can enjoy while you do it. I don't know if there's anybody else on the planet that is as good as he is at doing that. And so I've been watching them. I just love listening to him talk about things. So I'm not a hard reviewer. It's worth subscribing to Curiosity Stream just to listen to James Burke talk, to be honest. And they may have some other videos. I haven't really looked at any of the other ones yet. But I didn't know it was on there until someone here had asked a question about it, and then I jumped on, and it's great. And so it's not the replacement for the original. And if you have not, we're in a break. There isn't a lot going on right now. You might have some extra time over the weekend or even during the week. You can go to Internet Archives and find the original connections up there for free if you wanted to. And even at 360 by whatever resolution they have up there, it's watchable. It is still, after, what is it now, 50 years? It is still the high watermark for video education. Like, it is the best that's ever been made. I challenge anyone to tell me that they can find a better one. And my mark is that I still enjoy it, and I enjoyed it when I was a kid. When my kids, the first time I showed it to them, I had found it on Internet Archive, and I just showed these horrible little videos, horrible versions of that show. And what was amazing is when they were like 8 and 10 years old, I think, or something, somewhere in that range, you could not talk while that was running in the room. They didn't want you to talk in the kitchen because they couldn't. They were so tied into this show, and they're talking about really heady things and big history and quinine and gas vaporization and all these other things. And these kids are just totally tied in. We don't do that in education anymore. Like, we mostly fall asleep while we're watching things or fall asleep while we're watching something. There's something about how he pieced that together and how that was done. It was the biggest thing that BBC had ever done. It was BBC and PBS, and it was the biggest budget they had ever spent on anything, and it was worth every penny. And anybody building educational material, that should be required viewing, is the original connections. The other ones are okay. But the original connections is something that you can't make educational content until you've watched it. And the second best thing is Good Eats. And I went back and forth with Alton Brown at one point on Twitter, and he was like, "I just watched a lot of connections." So so Good Eats is merely derivative of the original. So anyway, so James Burke is probably not going to make a lot more videos. You should get up there and enjoy them because they're really great. Next question.
From Ryan Rademan in Chicago, Illinois. I'm on the fence between a 1080 monitor versus a 4K monitor for my teleprompter. I want it to look good, but wonder what the difference, or is the difference noticeable? If it's not, I'd rather not be taxing my PC as hard, pushing extra pixels. Is this sound logic?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yes. 1080 is fine.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
1080 is fine, but what you want to do when you're looking for a monitor is make sure it'll flip the text correctly because it's going to bounce off a mirror. Or
the software that you have that will do it. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I think the teleprompter is going to be far enough away; it's not going to be an issue. And you're right that 4K does put a little bit more strain on your GPU, but that's really not an issue anyways. These days, most GPUs have had no problems pushing 4K for quite a while.
Yeah, the things that we worry about with those are, number one is having a VESA mount because you're going to need some way to attach it to your teleprompt system. So buying a monitor with a VESA mount is important. We also want a C13 IEC cable. That's the 3-prong that you're normally used to so that you're not fiddling around trying to find some power brick to make that actually work. And then finally, obviously, an HDMI input, which I say may seem obvious, but someone in my last company actually was able to found a way to buy a monitor that only had DisplayPort. I was just like, they were a gamer, so they're like, "Oh, it works fine," and I'm like, not okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Speaking of prompters, that little Elgato prompter. That thing is super hard. They're way backward for months and months, like 3 months backward.
They hit a soft point. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's a lot of us have talked about less expensive and more effective teleprompters for a decade. And we've even built ones. I found pieces of it. I have to admit I didn't keep it. I'm not a keeper. But I found pieces of it while I was spelunking in my garage. We had printed these sides to go on the side of Lilliput monitors that you just slid glass through, like and it had like a little groove. That's all you had to do. You put these on, you screw them onto the side quarter mounts, quarter 20 mounts, and then you just slide a piece of glass in and put a little and that was like this little camera mounted version. And, those are it doesn't take much to build them. Other than the glass. So you can also do that as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael asks, Alex, you mentioned that Unreal Engine is used for virtual weather displays. How do you build the Unreal scene automatically? From my limited Unreal experience, dragging each element to its place can take a long time for complex scenes.
Go, Jason.
Oh boy, yes, it does take a whole bunch of time. Alex might be able to explain better what this is, but
you want to think of it
standing on one.
Yeah, you want to think about it more of you want to think about it less as you dragging something in for Unreal Engine and more like a game. You're basically building a game that happens to have the weather. So think about what a game can do. It can automatically generate all of those things based on data, based on inputs, based on all those other things, and it's putting those things into those things. So it's really building a game that does weather, and that you're comped over top of, and is tracked into. So that's the way you want to kind of think of it, less than how you put things together in Unreal and more how a game would be produced, which is what Unreal was originally built for. And so it's a game engine. They're building those behaviors and those processes into it. They're driving data into it. And I think that we'll be talking more and more about how to do things like Zoom going into it. But those are live feeds that, live data, or live people, live whatever, that are then being mapped into a system that then has a whole series of behaviors. Next question.
Hazma Gajar from Cape Town, South Africa. I have an HP inkjet printer. Looking at Epson EcoTank printers, what has been your experience from inkjet to EcoTank?
Yeah, go, Jason.
Oh.
Jason, are you there?
Sorry, there we go. I think EcoJet printers are the best of the worst. I think almost nobody needs ink in a printer. I think a color laser jet printer is the very best thing to do unless you are printing professionally photographs. But I really don't like inkjet.
Yeah, I mean, I was I think Mark and we've had this discussion on the show before, but if you leave I think it's a 2200 or whatever, if you leave your big inkjet printer, not use it for a long time, it's pretty hard. I don't even know if it's recoverable. I don't know if there's any way to get it to work again. But I've got one there that I'm trying to get working again. I'm like, I spent so much money on it. I want to give it one more shot. I am printing photos. The reason I'm getting ready to do this is that I realized that I have all these photos. I mean, I have a lot of great photos of my family and the things that I've done and everything else. And they're copied they're in the cloud and they're in things, but it's one big CME away from me never having any photos ever again. And so I've been thinking about, I've been starting to print them. I've got a couple prints, and I got to tell you, there's something about looking at a print that you shot, and the iPhones now will, have enough resolution. It's kind of magical. There's something about it being on paper that is different. And so I'm printing it on archive paper, putting it into little sleeves, and then putting them into it's just an archive of those, so that I have a printed version of these things, just to make sure that they don't get lost. They don't, there is a version of those. Go ahead, Mark.
So we have many different types of inkjet plotters here. It really depends what you're trying to print. And I would agree that the laser printers that are color have come down in price enough to where if you're not printing photographs, you just want color proofs and things, they're the most affordable in the long run.
No dye sublimation?
No. They're just yeah. The large printer scanners we have for doing 30 by 40 inch drawings, they seem to hold the ink a really long time. In fact, the date on the ink goes bad before you ever get to use the ink in the cartridges. And they'll have like 12 cartridges. And what's gotten worse is they won't run once they hit the expiration date, even though the ink is probably just fine. The printer just says, "I'm sorry, you're out of date" or whatever. But Canon has a nice little laser printer. If we're doing really high-end, high-quality prints that we want to have, we'll use some of the Epson ones. They're about $3,000. They're not the one that's mentioned here. The Epson Echo Tank, I've heard the problem with it is that it's just really slow. It holds the ink well. The ink lasts a long time, but the prints are pretty slow per print.
And I have to admit, for me, it drops off. Like, I'm going to buy a really high-end printer to do my images, and then I have these cheap laser printers that are just fast and they're black and white. Right. I don't even, like if I want color, I'm going to go to the nice printer. If I want everything else, is just going to come out of black and white as fast as it possibly can. And I'm really stingy about I don't want to print my FedEx labels on a really expensive printer. But I'd also, why bother printing on, cheap paper or whatever if you're, so it's, I go one way.
And we found that the high-end ones we use so seldom that it's just more cost-effective to send it out.
Right.
Because we end up throwing the printer away after, if you haven't used it in 2 years, you go to use it, you can't, you spend more time cleaning it.
Yeah, exactly. Good, Jason.
Yeah, and the last part of that is I don't want to Alex, absolutely. I love printing pictures. I learned early on that Sam's Club will let you use their $11,000 printer for 11 cents a pop. And like if you bring your paper there, they'll let you use that. Now that's no longer the case, but like, right. At the end of the day, just send it out. It's cheaper.
I had ones in one of my offices that I printed. They print them on metal, and they're the best thing ever. I'm putting together another collection of them. They're actually in Virginia or Maryland or something like that. And they come with a little set off so that they set off about a half an inch off the wall. And those are great. Over one of our green rooms, we just had all these production pictures of all that were all printed on metal, and they're just very rich. And I'm thinking of doing a couple more of those. Next question.
Steve Bauer from Seattle. Do the people reporting the weather on TV use a teleprompter? If so, how can they be so conversational?
Go ahead, Chris.
So, Steve, think about what they're doing. They do this all the time. If you and I had to report the weather, I'd be nervous about it. I'd be trying to figure out, they have to pre-program all of the and the weather in the valley and the cold weather, they have to program it. If you watch carefully, they have a little clicker. They're going next event, next event, next event. They do it all the time. Some of them are doing it multiple times a day, and they do it at least 5 days a week. They do it all the time. They're conversational because they've learned that they have to have a conversation with their audience. They're developing a relationship. My sister-in-law is really an interesting case study because she loves her local Channel 3 news in Sacramento. She knows all of the on-camera personalities. She knows when their birthdays are. She knows how many kids they have, because they talk about. She has developed this one-way, kind of creepy relationship with the reporters because that's what they have to do.
They call it parasocial.
Is that what it's called? I've never heard that.
That's the technical term for it. Parasocial relationship. Yeah, it's one way.
So is that
feeling like you're connected to an influencer that doesn't know you is considered a parasocial relationship.
That's how I feel about you, Alex.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate that.
So I did not know that term. That's a good term.
Yeah.
But that's what they're doing. That's part of their job.
Yeah.
They're not using teleprompter. If they're still using green screen, and let's face it, the technology is such that they could be doing it on a big LED screen, whatever these days, quite well. There's almost always monitors right off camera where they can see that their hand lines up with the thing. I was looking for some pictures. I couldn't find any really good ones, but their dialogue is they're just talking.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I think they're using a multiple set of these types of equipment. They've got notes on a teleprompter hanging from a camera in front of them that they're looking at to make sure they've got the high and the low or whatever. And then they're looking off to the side, as Chris said, if they're still using green screens to make sure their hands are pointing in the right direction. Most of the sets that I've seen now are going to video walls, so they can actually just point right at it.
And usually it's a mixture of the two. When people are really good at teleprompter, what they have to say when they're going through what the weather's going to have, that's probably teleprompter, or at least notes on the teleprompter. And then they're chit-chatting with the folks that are there. And people who are good at this will shift back and forth between those exceptionally well. And it also takes a good teleprompt operator to be able to do that because they're running all over the place to make that happen. Next question.
Alexander Knight from Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. I was watching David Coulier's Full House Rewind on YouTube and noticed that he and John Stamos were wearing lavs. However, they also had SM7Bs. Thoughts?
Yeah, I looked at this. This is what he's talking about here. Let me. So you can see the lav here and the SM7B here. I think that my guess is that they had pre-show, post-show where they're walking around a little bit or they're doing something, and this is a wireless setup. It could also be a backup. I mean, it's a really crude backup if that's what it is. But I would typically, if I was going to do a backup, I'd have the SM7B here and I have a shotgun that's right out of frame to do that, as opposed to doing it that way. But my guess is there's a pre-show and post-show or something that they're going to go to that they don't want to re-mic them. They just want them to, there's a time when they're off mic, like they're not part of they're kind of like not part of the show, and they want to still have them mic'd up. So I think that it's a dual purpose, either during the show, post-show. I doubt it's backup because it's such a lab is so much of a drop in quality than from the SM7B. It'd be noticeable. But I think as a pre-show, post-show, something else like that, it makes sense. Go ahead, Chris.
It could also just be an ego thing. I know that when I walk away from this desk, quite often I wear a lav just so I feel more important.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the weird thing, that what you're saying makes sense, Alex, but the weird thing that I found when I was listening to it, it sounds like John Stamos's mic is the lav because it doesn't sound very good. It's very, very thin sounding.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look at it. I hate lavs. Anyway, so just like, why would you do that? Unless he's too far away from the thing. So yeah, next question.
Hazma Kajar from Cape Town, South Africa. Confused, the new Mac Mini Pro with Sonoma downloaded Zoom Desktop version 5.17.1. After installation and relaunch, the Mac asked to install Rosetta. Is that real?
Go ahead, Ronnie.
Definitely not. You should not be forced to install Rosetta. What you have done is what I have done, and probably a few millions more. If you go to the download site, you have the big blue nice download button, which actually downloads the Intel version of the software. Just below it, you have a small text with a click here link to download for M1 or M2 series, which is actually, if anyone from Zoom is listening to this or watching this, you should fix this. This is tricking people into downloading the wrong software.
Mark?
Same thing. It's just go a little bit further down the page, and you'll just see the button to click for M1s.
M1 should be at the top. Go ahead, Jason.
No, they nailed it. They need a unified installer package. Period.
No. They do that on purpose. I mean, these are different builds. They're entirely different builds that are there.
Well, I know, but it's not a big installation, so they should just let you download both or download an installer app or something.
I'd be interested to see why they don't do that. I'm guessing there's a reason. Next question.
Zach Stallsmith from Chautauqua, New York. I am attempting to join the Discord server and have adjusted my display name according to the server, but I'm still in restricted mode. Is there a step that I'm missing?
Sometimes it takes us a little time to get there. We'll take a look at it. I mean, I think that Chad goes through those in passes, and so sometimes you might spend a day or two in purgatory. So we'll work on it. Definitely I think in the announcements or the very first one you can post in there. If you post like, "Hey, I did my thing and I'm still not in," I think yesterday I brought somebody into the system from that. So look at that as well. But we'll take a look at it and try to do a pass. It's just a slow time right now, but we'll get faster at it. Sorry about that. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Currently, I use both Logic and Bitwig for my personal electronic music projects. I have my Bitwig upgrade plan paid until 2026. But is it worth switching to Ableton and learning it as the industry standard?
Go, Jason.
If the sound you're creating is unique, nobody cares how you did it. So no, if that's your basis, then don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, Billie Eilish, I think, and they record everything in their bedroom with Logic, and put everything. Or maybe they don't do now, but I think the first one was. Your creative process is your creative process. I think that the only thing to look at is how much training materials and support materials are out there. I think that you may find that there's more out there to explain how to do certain things in Ableton than there is in Bitwig. So that might be the thing, if there isn't. But there's no industry standard that makes it worth jumping from one to the other unless you really think you're going to get a job at a studio that might be using one or the other. And I don't see a lot of people, like artists, use Ableton for what they're doing. I don't see a lot of postings for Ableton operators. This is something that's really a personal thing for you to figure out what you're comfortable with. Ableton's super powerful. I'm not as familiar with Bitwig, but it really is what you're comfortable with and what you can produce good music, as Jason said. Next question.
Håkan Fors from Stockholm, Sweden, started using Unity Cloud for comms this year. Love it. What are your recommendations on PLs for 3 to 5 camera live sport production?
Everybody has their own opinion about this. Comms is kind of it's almost a religion. But typically, we have the way we build a lot of these things, and it depends on whether it's yours or whether you're production. But we usually have client comms where our producers can talk to the clients, and the clients can't listen or talk to all the other panel. So we are pretty restrictive about what they can and who they can and can't talk to, and who they can and can't listen to. And so we have a production comms, which is just the producers or the production staff working on things. Oftentimes, we have a comms for the stage manager and anybody related to the stage manager so that they can talk to the producers and they can talk to those other things. We have, obviously, camera, audio. Those all have their own verticals that are there. Again, a client, client comms is another one. And then the last one is a little bit of a, for us, if there's something online, if you're having your streaming team or whatever that you might want to be able to talk to directly. Those are the ones that are probably the ones off the top of my head. But those are the 6. And with Unity, you get kind of used to just using 6. So if you use other systems, sometimes you get used to using a lot more PLs. But those are the 6 that I would probably think about first. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Alex, what app was running on the iPad? The camera was shooting the slate, and what was the Yamaha unit below the iPad?
Go ahead, Ronnie, real quick.
I think the app was the movie slate, if I'm not wrong. Yamaha thing, I don't know.
I don't know what the Yamaha thing was. It was in the shot. I wasn't using the Yamaha. Whatever was the Yamaha thing, I look back at the photo. I have to look at it again. I was like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what was there that was made by Yamaha that might have found its way into the picture. But what I was using primarily was the movie slate. So movie slate is a great little app. I think it's a subscription now. I've had it since version 1. And again, I wasn't really using it as a slate. I was using it more as a way to generate those little tones. That's the thing that I needed out of it. And it's not like I didn't use any. The other thing I like is I can visually mark my images. So I can say, I know what this is. So that's what I liked about that's what I was using Movie Slate for. We're going to be talking about, think about your suggestions for our infrastructure, the things you'd like us to talk about. We've talked about tape. We've talked about studios, lighting, all kinds of other things. And so also IT and cloud and all those other bits and pieces. And so think about what you want to do there. A quick reminder that tomorrow at 9 a.m., we do have the Ruthless Reviews on our wild card Saturdays, where there's more than 4. We do these Ruthless Reviews. That's your chance to jump into after hours and actually get your setup, reviewed without doing it in front of everybody else. So 9 o'clock, look at Discord or the email for more information. Welcome back, and now we're going to talk about infrastructure. So I think, one of the things that, this is kind of a little bit of there's a lot of things that we talk about here in the, in infrastructure, but I think that it's a really, really exciting day, because we cover so many different things that are related to that. So I think that when you think about everything, again, right from tape to cloud production to wireless transmissions to return transmissions to all these other things, that's what Friday really becomes. And so think about what we want to think about is what do we want to learn and what do we want to. We'll look back here in just a second of what we did last year. And I will say we're at the end of this week. I can't believe how many shows we had where we covered. I mean, we did almost 250 shows, and there's just a lot of incredible content here. So what we're going to do is we're going to play back what we did over the last year, watch this, and try to remember some of the ones that really stood out for you as a viewer, and let us know inside of Makana, or you can also use askofficehours.global. Put in the stuff that you liked. What were the things that stood out? The things that were the best. You can just put those in as questions. Just do them as comments. So what did you like? And when you're thinking about all the things we covered last year, what would you like to see more of next year? So as you watch this video, think through those things and start throwing things into Makana. Let's go ahead and roll the tape.
Understanding Digital First Events, Zoom Team Q&A, Silicon Valley Video Summit, FlyPack Design and Construction, Designing Small Venues for Digital and Hybrid Events, Live Sports Behind the Scenes, Larry O'Connor of OWC, NAB Coverage Planning, Studio Review BTS, BitFocus Companion,
Matthew Simiglia of Alteon.io,
The $1,000 Studio, Office Hours 2.5 Update, Zoom NAB Announcements, NAB Coverage Review, Epiphan, Audio and Video over the Network, Cinegear Coverage Planning, The $10,000 Studio, Remote Production Update, WWDC Wrap-Up, How Office Hours Works, Stage Automation, The World of DMX Lighting, What Makes a Studio, Production Show and Tell, Loading In and Loading Out, Boomerang Carnets, Back to School Special, How We Covered SIGGRAPH, Zoom Update, Matt Bach of Puget Systems, NDI Workflows, Solving Networking Challenges, Virtual Video Control Room Service, VizNow means Cloud Now, Cable Management, IBC Coverage Breakdown, OWC talks Jellyfish and Storage, Zoomtopia Recap, Lab Office Hours Migration, Building a Multiview Tool for NDI, Lab Office Hours Website, Studio BTS Review, Streaming to Multiple Locations, Power Hour, BitFocus Companion.
It's quite a year. so yeah, it was good. And really, think about the things that popped out there. I think that, I think the theme that I've really seen is that I really enjoy a lot of the kind of real nuts and bolts of talking through things. I mean, I do like to just see new things, But some of the ones where we've kind of broken down what we're planning to do or what we did or how we put those together or talking to folks that, and this is a kind of across the whole week, I found those to be something that really jump out at me at things that I'm really interested in. And I think that also I can tell you as someone who looks at the stats, a lot of people are interested in those. Those tend to do really well. So those are things that we definitely are thinking a lot more about. Without any, the panel throw. I don't know if there's anything that stood out for the panel. Let us know. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and we'll go ahead and jump into some of the suggestions and comments from the viewers. Let's go ahead and jump in.
Zach Stallsmith from Chautauqua, New York. I've worked in both IT and AV production environments in my career and have some unique perspectives and insights on how these worlds must come together to have successful events. Can we have IT and AV directors together on the show to discuss this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we do have some of that naturally with folks that are doing that. But it'd be great, Zach. I can't wait to see you on the show. When you say like, "Hey, let's put all this together," that the first thing that comes to mind is like, I think this would be a great idea for you to do. So reach out to me, and we'll think about people that we'd want to put on that show. I think it's a great idea. Is really talking about what it takes to make IT and AV work. I think that we've talked to that a little bit, but definitely not enough. Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. AV-focused switches, routers, and hubs. Why needed and how best to configure?
This kind of feels like it comes right back to the last one. The last one is talking about that. So the first one is really talking about really just generally about the needs, the IT needs for AV, and the second one is and these are definitely two different weeks, is really talking about the kinds of hubs and what you need in a hub or that process to actually make that work. Yeah, it's a great idea. Next comment.
Chris Sabato from Albany, Oregon. Fenwick audio style lab for setting up AWS.
Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
Yeah, I have my AWS account ready for that. So just say date and time and I'll be ready.
Yeah. And I think that we definitely, we've talked about AWS in the past. I definitely think that we could do a second hour on the basics of setting up a live stream on AWS, which I think would be great because it's not very hard. Like it's not super hard, but we could talk a little bit about how to create your AWS account, how to kind of get it set up, and then also how to do your first stream, which is, again, it's not a super complicated thing. Where it gets more complicated and where we could probably dig into it is how do I stream redundant outputs to multiple things. So how do I build that up? Because when the media live makes it really easy to take a stream in and stream it out to multiple locations. But if I want to be able to turn each one of those on and off or have a lot of different settings or so on and so forth, that starts to become a more complex system. And I think those are probably 2 different weeks. And I do think that, covering AWS on a fairly regular basis on Fridays, I think would make sense. The kind of thing we did with Fenwick, we were kind of Fenwick. It's funny to call it Fenwick when Chris is here. Anyway, every time I say Fenwick,
I think it's perfectly natural.
I always want to go Fenwick. Anyway, so we experimented with that kind of walkthrough. I think that one of the things we're looking at for that style is potentially making those separate shows where they are a little bit more. They could go longer. They're a little less structured, and we just kind of go through it. So we would do to kind of give you a sense of it. The video that Chris did before it would still happen, and then we do a 2-hour where we could do an overview of it and talk through it. It might be a little bit of shake and bake, not quite the walking us through it, because I think there was a temptation that we had that Chris had of like, well, let's talk about it in after hours. Well, what we want to do is basically go. We're going to walk through it in a fairly organized way for the second hour. And then we're going to do a workshop that probably we save on YouTube that is, we can go as long as we want, and talk through it. And it's a little bit more of a, a voyeur version of this thing. And we still take questions in from Mukana and so on and so forth. So we're kind of thinking about these kind of workshops that will sit outside of the show to do those. But I also think that there is a second hour of just walking through your first AWS setup. Because boy, would I love to talk to the interface folks at AWS. It is like you want to expand it. And you're just like, this could be so great if it wasn't so just weird. Like the way it's set up. And so it's just definitely driven by programmers and not by interface people. So anyway, so I think that walking through it would be great. Next comment.
Mark Giuliani from Washington, D.C. Can we have a show that discusses getting signal out from remote broadcasts when Ethernet isn't available? Cellular, bonded cellular, Starlink, sat trunks, etc. How and when?
Yeah. I think that talking about all the different ways of transport, a whole second hour about transport would be great. I think that would definitely be a great subject. So yeah, I think that we'll definitely take a look at where we can put that in, because it really is. I mean, you could almost do a whole one on each one of those, but I think that at least we'd start off with one that just talks about the different ways of doing transport. But I think that, there's understanding bonded or understanding sat trucks or understanding those types of things, but talking about what the pluses and minuses are of each one of them. Like, for instance, we've talked about in the past that doing it with bonded works great for streaming because you've got a buffer. Doesn't work as good for WebRTC because you don't have a buffer, and linking those all together becomes problematic. So, talking through those issues, and then of course satellite truck is great, except that it's really expensive and it has a lot of latency. So those are the things that we kind of think through, and so I think that building that up would make a lot of sense. Next comment.
Laura Thompson from Beaumont, Texas. What it takes to safely film and shoot an eclipse?
Yeah, go Jason.
I mean, I did this for NASA space flights with Kevin Michael Reed and a whole bunch of other people over the course of the eclipse this year, and it was a ton of fun. I would love to get NASA space flights on here.
Yeah, we should
as like kind of a prequel to our eclipse coverage.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that we are planning to do a fairly robust eclipse coverage it's April 8th is the last eclipse for a decade at least, if not more. I think it's more than a decade, that at least for the United States. And so we're getting ready to have, I think we have 4 or 5 locations or more. We've got people like kind of planning to be in different places. We're kind of working out who how we're going to run that. We've been meeting about it almost every week for a couple months now. And so we're kind of planning through that. You will see in a couple different places, us talking about how we're planning to do it, and then of course we'll talk about how we did it, whether it worked or not. Next comment.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. Where does the HDMI SDI cable end and IP wiring take over?
Yeah, I think in general, talking about that process and what it takes, and I think one of the things we're constantly tracking is NDI versus 2110, and how and I guess Dante AV, although no one I know is using Dante AV, but it's something that may someday be something we pay more attention to. But I do think that understanding where that IP, where that goes and what it takes to make that manage, and we've talked a little bit about it in the past. One of our more successful shows for a Friday was the NDI, roundtable, where we had tons of NDI experts come in and talk about it. That I want to do again, is to have people come in and talk about those things, because I think that was a really successful day, for us. So we'll definitely bring more in about IP, and again, I think that it really depends on your infrastructure and I think that's and what you're trying to do, but figuring out why we use SDI still, or why we would use 2110 and why we would use NDI, I think is an important discussion to keep on having. Next question.
Alexander Knight from Port Coquitlam, BC, Canada. What does it take to build an office hours hardware rack in your own home studio? What kind of power, networking, redundancy, cooling, and budget required?
Yeah, I think you're right that in a lot of ways we've talked a lot about, we do kind of behind the scenes, and we still will keep on doing those, these kind of regular, like, where is our studio now and what are we doing now? What have we changed? Because I think we learn a lot. I think the reason that so many people look so good in our frames here is specifically because we keep on trading notes between each other about like what's working and not working about our sets, and also just what we're doing. We're all learning from somebody's got this little button or this little thing over there that is working for them. And so I think that I think figuring that out, but I do think that thinking about, how much power. What's really great now is that, like, home studios, I don't know, my home I think everything that I have up here is still less than 20 amps. It's probably, it's very close to it. I'm using 2 different circuits, but 15 amp circuits. So I know I'm under 30 amps. So it's gotten a lot easier than what it has been in the past. So I think that's I think it's a great idea. And I think continuing to talk about our home studios, one of the things I also want to do is, and I don't know, I think this fits into Fridays, is we really need to keep on coming back to, it's for us, it seems simple, but we got to have some shows and maybe even some VODs about the basic setup of how to just not look bad in meetings and for events. It's still evidently it's still a mystery for a lot of folks because so many people are looking so bad, and sounding so bad. And I think that as you watch the news, as we watch events, I just feel like if you're going to be in front of more than about 20 people, and for me it'd be 5, it'd be nice to have a good setup, and it doesn't have to be the setups that we have here, but talking about what those minimum viable setups are constantly so that people know what they could just go out and get. We have a lot of folks that, they've been on broadcast over and over and over again. And then we give them a MV7, which nobody had given them before, or we show them that there's a little ring light that they could use, or this other little light. And they're like, no one told me. No one told me that I sounded bad or looked bad. They just said, okay, you're ready to go. And they put me on air. And it's a real, it's undermining broadcast in my opinion. Like it undermines our own confidence in what we're looking at because people want to say that it should just be the message, but it's never just the message. It's how you deliver the message. And when you deliver it badly, people don't take it as seriously. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things at play here, Alex. One is they don't know. And 2 is that they don't care. They should care.
Right.
You and I both agree they should care, but they don't care. Ultimately, the speed bump between here and there is just too much. They don't care. I don't want to see that mic. I can't fix physics. The mic needs to be close to sound better.
Right.
I will say this, and I've told this story in the past. I was in a meeting with a very good client. I've known her for decades. And I was struggling because there was 6 or whatever us in the meeting. And I could only comprehend about a third of what she said, the whole meeting. And she just, and so I sent her a text message toward the end of the meeting, and I said, hey, could you and I continue for a couple of minutes afterwards? And she said, sure. And then at the end of the meeting, she said, and because it was her meeting, she said, okay, so that's it. And Chris, you and I can stick around for a few minutes. And Paul said, do I need to stay for that? I go, no, you don't. And what I had done is I had recorded her for 30 seconds in the meeting. And I just said, I say this to you because I know it matters, but listen to this. And she was appalled at how bad it sounded. Well, and I said, I couldn't understand like 2/3 of what you were saying that whole meeting. She goes, why is it so bad? And I explained it to her.
Wi-Fi, big room.
Yeah, it was Wi-Fi. It was. I think she was using her phone. Actually, she thought, well, it's easier to just use my phone. For you, well, I like to walk around. Okay, but
and then
the cost is people can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and we. I think I mentioned this before, but we were doing prep for, and they had built a conference room for virtual, like all the things. They had wired it all up, and this is the problem, and this is why we need. I'm just speaking to why we need to have more of these sessions and regular sessions throughout the year on Fridays. Is the problem is that when you have an integrator that doesn't do production, they're not really. You should not do that. Like you should never hire an integrator that doesn't do production, because, in my opinion, because they don't like to build your studios. The part that it matters. They can build the back end, but even then it's a little bit shaky. When they do production, they understand what's needed. And when they don't do production, they're it's things that make it convenient for them, or it looks shiny, or it does whatever, and they're not thinking through what's absolutely needed. We had to tell them they're in this round conference room in Europe, and it was really shiny, and we could not understand anything they were saying. and they're like, we just spent millions on this, millions of euros on this conference room. It was a big conference room, like 30 people in a round area, and it looks gorgeous. But we're like, but we can't understand anything you're saying. And like, but we spent a lot of money on this to get this right. And we were like, well, you didn't, and
like, now you did spend a lot of money, but you didn't
spend a lot of money.
Spent a lot of money, didn't get it right. Yeah.
So we had to move them from the multi-million dollar euro conference room to a small office somewhere that would sound better. Because it was just one person. We didn't need a bunch of people, but I knew that after we had that meeting, there was going to be a lot of meetings. Like, somebody's going under the bus, because it was and all you have to do is listen to it. And the same thing is record it and listen to it. Go ahead, Chris.
Here's the video that somebody needs to make. And there's a lot of industrious people with spare time on their hands here. What somebody needs to do is they need to have a simple script, like, hi, welcome to my show, or welcome to our broadcast. This is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about this, this, and this, and here's the graphic. Now, you take that script, and it has to be 15 seconds long, 20 seconds long. So do it, get access to one of these atrocious conference rooms, do it there.
Yeah.
Do it with a laptop looking up at somebody's nose. Do it with a webcam on top of a desktop camera looking down too high, and maybe a what's that thing called, the Blue Yeti mic too far away, and then do it with the Yeti mic positioned, and then do office hours. Okay, now when you do that video, in the corner you say, this is your $50,000 conference room. This is a laptop with no assistance. This is a laptop with a webcam. This is and say this is a $100 solution. This is a $500 solution. This is a $1,000 solution, and we need to just flood that everywhere.
Yeah, people just have
we
to
need
see
to
it.
flood that video everywhere so people see the difference, and then maybe there's a follow up. How to build a better system.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it needs to be in one file. It needs to have the price and the explanation of what you're looking at, and it's just the same script over and over and over.
Good, Ronnie.
Same person.
Yeah, we have something similar like that. And to your idea, Chris, we should have this as a countdown for every show we do at the office hours.
Something like that. We are thinking about the countdown and whether we should put tips and tricks in and little things and everything else. So the countdown may adjust a little bit as we move forward as well. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael, Proxmox virtualization. Many people are moving away from VMware since the Broadcom acquisition.
Yeah, I think having other virtualization tools and what those look like definitely makes sense to figure that out. Next comment.
Håkan Fors from Stockholm, Sweden. More NDI content. How to set it up, troubleshooting and managing setups.
Yeah. And I thought that the week that we did NDI was one of the most successful weeks we had. And so we'll definitely do that again. Absolutely. Next comment.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. Development, constructing, and 3D printing your gear and extensions for it.
Yeah. We need to do more about 3D printing because it's just super useful. And I think that also more about how to, so one of the things that I'm, kind of going through and with middling success, and I'm trying to figure this all out to get it really, really well done, is digitizing a lot of the hardware that I have around me so that I can print things for it, and so, but it turns out that, like, for instance, a Mini Extreme being black and being long and being awkward in size is not super easy to do a photogrammetry shoot for just without really setting up for it. And so I've set up a couple different versions. I haven't been happy with it. And so I can measure it. I mean, you can measure it and build it. But one of the things that that I'm looking at doing is kind of building these real base versions of these 3D models and to scale so that you can always use them as little mock-ups that are like low resolution mock-ups that just give you the right size so that you can build stands and build other things for them and that they just kind of fit in. And so anyway, so that's the but I think that talking about photogrammetry as it relates to, so I think there's some more photogrammetry that we can do because that market has gotten way better. Like, it's just amazing. I use a lot of photogrammetry now, and I did in the past, but I've been doing photogrammetry of some sort for 30 years now. But when I did it when we started, it was literally just moving boxes into frame and doing everything manually. Now it's like you waving your phone around and you get a model. And so, and those things are, but going through and looking at those apps and the proper use of them and how to make them work, I think we need to do more of, because it really does make a difference. Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. When do I need an IP IT expert as part of my crew? Where to find such a person? When should I consult with an IT person to help design my workflows for a live event?
Yeah, I think that this gets back into the earlier comment or question of really thinking about the how IT and IP interact with your shows. For me, it's every show. Like every show, we need people that, I don't know if we necessarily have a person all the time managing the IT, but we definitely have to think about all of our IP and IT and everything else that's going on at multiple levels every single show. And that's been the case for us the last 10 years. Because at minimum, even if we're using SDI and we're not using NDI, all of those devices have to be, how do we manage them so that we can get to them and make adjustments without having to actually go up to the front panel to do something, which is crazy talk. So if you have an IP connection to it, you should be using that. And so figuring that out is, I think, important. Next comment.
From me, the infrastructure vertical encompasses IT, physical gear, networking, and more. How does this impact the weekly show cadence, and what vendors and luminaries are brought into the show?
Yeah, and so to kind of give people a sense of it, we've shown this in the other ones here. Let me see if I can pull this up really quickly. And again, we're still, I want to say when I show this that we're still making a couple adjustments to it, and we will continue to. Like, we're going to schedule out a quarter, and then we're going to go, oh, this is the stuff that we liked, and this is the stuff that we didn't like, and or we find this part of the format too constraining. There's a bunch of things that we're still taking into account as we do this. So let me show you what the right now what we're again looking at is. So for those of you who haven't seen this part here, this is kind of what we're kind of working through here. So let me pop this up here. So if you look at the way this works, this is our format for next year. And again, this is a work in progress. So it looks much more organized, but we're still, figuring things out, but you have to start somewhere. So essentially what happens is that if we go back to, a whole month like this, you have, we have the different verticals that are here. And I've talked about this earlier in the week, but some people may only have come for Friday. So if you think about this is infrastructure. This is what we're talking about here. So we have video, sound, graphics, and business. And then in each one of these, we want a luminary, someone to come talk to us. We want a basic, let me get rid of that, a basic, which is, something that everybody needs to know. We don't want to leave people behind. Vendor, which is obviously bringing someone in to show us something. And then finally a subject, which is a more advanced one. You can think about like when we talk about the basics of HDR, that's a basic. When we bring the crew from Thursday Night Football in to talk about how they use it, that's a subject because we can barely keep up. So those are so that's kind of how that works. Now what we do is we cascade that through the days so that it's not, so that it's moving around during, it's not perfect, but it moves around in that area. So you'll see these kind of patterns that are going down here. And then inside of those, every 3 months, so every quarter, we're kind of looking for different areas. So when we do a luminary, we want something that general, it's kind of a wild card. Someone talking about the future of things. Again, this may not be the one that we're using, or a creator. In this case, we're looking at production. That's where the tape and the infrastructure and all those other bits and pieces. We feel like we should be talking about the cloud at least once a quarter, to really make sure that we're covering that. And then general IT is once a quarter as well, for each one of these things, right? So a luminary that's in that area, a basic that's in that area, so the idea is and you'll see how they zigzag through here, so basically, we're going, like this. So we're kind of moving through that process, and we're doing that for all of these, right? So that's how we kind of, when you see these lighter ones, that's what we're doing there. What this ensures is that I can go out, I can schedule out, go out to June and say on the third Friday, we're going to talk about IT. We're looking for a vendor to talk about IT on the third Friday of June. So we can go pretty far out as far as scheduling. And what that means is we can still do that now, but the difference is that we can do it and still ensure that we're not going to get into ruts. Sometimes we've gotten into situations where we have a lot of the same thing over and over and over again because we were scheduling it in different parts or whatever, and we weren't thinking it through that format. By having this format up there, we're able to we can schedule things way out, and we know that if we're able to follow that format, and it won't be perfect, by the way. Someone's going to get up here and go, well, you said you were going to do cloud, but instead you talked about tape. Things happen. like we're trying to make sure we have a schedule. You have to remember that for next year and for this last year, if you looked at all of those things that we did last year, we did about 250 different days, and next year we've got about 260 scheduled days of the year to figure out. So there are wild cards. Again, these wild cards, by the way, is because what we're doing is we're saying, well, we're doing what I wanted to do is really make sure that you knew if you're only coming on Fridays that the first Friday is always a luminary. The second Friday is always, regardless of what happened before, whether we're shifting any of these. So you'll see some doubles here because these get shifted up and down based on the way that the month works. But you'll see these little wild cards that we can use those for anything. So those wild cards are, those are days that are there in the week, but we can throw anything into them. So if there's some kind of special, we won't schedule those usually until the last minute, a couple weeks before. But the other ones, we're going to try to kind of fit that format. And, this is, what I'm showing you here is TV programming 101. Like, this is not something that, I would love to say that I made that up. Like, I made up how this works. But building these cascading programming systems is exactly what you do when you have a daily show, is you start to, build this because it's too hard to keep track of otherwise. And so, So we're going to, how that works is you can see that we're going to make sure that we're touching on cloud once a quarter in each area. We're going to worry about IT, and then we're going to talk about more of the hardware. That gets into, like, for instance, we don't want to be talking all about hardware or production, hard production like load in or shipping or logistics. If we do that 3 or 4 weeks in a row, then the IT folks will stop coming. If we do just IT, then other people will stop coming. If we just do cloud, other people will stop coming. And so the idea is that, we're covering all these different areas that we think make sense that we think people want to learn, or sometimes we think people should learn. So anyway, that's how that format works. And just to give you kind of an overall sense of how we're at least attempting it. It's hard to get off the ground. Like, we spent last year just worrying about in last year's work, we really just only worried about these 4, right? And that was hard at the very beginning. The first couple of months was a little chaotic. And then after that, it started to sink in. We fell off of it a little bit because we had to change our hardware, where our hardware was. But now we're cooking. So anyway, so that's the format, and that's how we'll kind of try to figure those things out. Next suggestion.
Ken Jordan from Argelès-sur-Mer, France, setting up a patch bay for musicians with multiple synthesizers.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think that, maybe we can get Nick back on. Nick, if you're listening, Nick actually listens a lot. I get comments, but having him come on and talk a little bit about how he approaches it. Another person, Todd Reynolds obviously has done a lot of this, so bringing him on to talk about it, I think, would be a great second hour. So I think we can think through, like, how that works. I would love to have another tour from, Todd Reynolds was on, a couple of years ago, and he's been really busy recently. But it'd be great to have him back on, talk and just walk through his studio and how it works. It's a magical magical space. So I think that having him on again to talk about that would be great. Next comment.
Håkan Fors from Stockholm, Sweden. Love the behind the scenes, like the tennis events with Jeff.
Yeah, we know that behind the scenes is a big deal, and we want to do more of that. I think that we're really thinking hard about how we do that. I don't know how much of that will be done in the second hour other than a follow-up, like, hey, we did something for a whole day or a whole morning or a whole whatever, and then we cut out some of the clips, we take some of the images, we bring people in that were watching it, and we follow up with more Q&A, because sometimes we can't get to that while we're in production. So it's things we can talk about after production. So definitely stay tuned for more of that. We're really excited about that format. I left Industrial Light and Magic 20-some years ago to do behind the scenes of making movies. And how many times have we done it? Not very many. We're very close now. So anyway, I've done mostly production, but when we've done it, it has been always exciting. We did one with a DP from ILM we did one from a DP from ILM who basically walked us through a green screen shoot, and you could listen to him. We mic'd him, so you could just listen and talk to the actors and figure all those bits and pieces out. And that was all in the room. It was 20 people with a 1 watt FM transmission. They're little $2 receivers, and they were listening to it. And it was the most popular thing we ever did. And we've done it with Brent. We did an online one with Brent By where he turned cardboard into a set and looked great. And that, I think that we want to, so we're going to keep on trying to figure out how to do more of those. Next question.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. What can be done to fix or treat a room and studio to improve the sound, lights, and wiring?
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
And don't forget the mechanical system, because you've got to keep the talent cool and the equipment cool.
Yeah. So figuring out how to build studios that work, both in the infrastructure as well as the lighting and everything else, I think is we've talked about that a little bit. Never enough to talk about how to, build your studio out. And again, this gets back into how do we even take a room? And this is where I think we're going to have some interactions between doing some videos ahead of time. That's one of the things we're really talking about doing a lot more next year, doing some little videos ahead of time that show up on the website. And then, potentially doing a workshop where we have people actually, do it, we watch it, and then potentially doing a second hour that is, more Q&A that kind of fills in all those gaps. Next comment.
Me again, building a Zoom kit for non-technical end users that keeps them looking their best without technological complexities getting in the way.
It is so hard. It is just so hard to get it right. And, you feel like Elgato would be the one to figure this out. Like they're so close now. Like we can here's a whole bunch of little bits and pieces that make it work. And then of course the problem is different people have specific things. I know some people who use, they'll use a shotgun mic or they'll use a lav mic and they'll say, well, that worked great. And I listen to it and I go, did it? Did it? Is that as good as you like? And so I think that it really depends on what you're trying to get out of it to make that actually work. But I do think sending those kits out and what the ramifications are of that, because, for instance, if you send out something that's really easy to use, it's often very dependent on the quality of the space that it's in. Whereas if you send out something that's hard to build, it's less dependent on the quality. There's more lights, there's better mics, there's better, things are closer to them, but it's harder to put together, so I think talking through those challenges, I think would be, it's something we've done in the past and we'll do in the future, and we can't do enough of it. Next comment.
Henry Ramos from Yonkers, New York. How about a session on tried and true failover networks? Maybe even a lab for those with 2 ISPs.
Yeah, I think that definitely talking about the failover processes that a lot of us use, I think is valuable. So, and where that failover actually happens. Because a lot of times, for instance, you can have everything going through the same power with failover, or a lot of times we try to, for instance, have multiple internets and the encoders are on multiple power supplies. And so it's happening at the CDN. Like if I lose one whole window, one whole piece of it, the CDN just falls over. But is that the case for everything? And that's the thing that we should definitely, I think covering that would make a lot of sense. Next comment.
Andy Kokendorfer from Vieira, Florida. How to pitch live streaming series to corporations.
Yeah, I think that's a Monday session, to be honest. I think that, pitching, when we get into pitching, I think that it gets into that's a Monday session. I think we need to do it. I think talking about, next week, by the way, we're talking about the future, so what do we see as future trends for all of these things? And one of the things I think is corporations still really haven't gotten out of the rut that they have about how to communicate with their employees, with their customers, with their partners. There's a lot of things that they could make a lot better, and they're not doing it. And I think that in the next couple of years, we're going to see them do a lot more of it. So talking about those trends and being on the front end of talking to them ahead of time about that, I think would make a lot of sense. And really how to talk about that. Next comment.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. What can be used straight from an AT&T or T-Mobile store to get my production onto YouTube? What is my kit getting for any show up and streaming onto YouTube? Why do I need a LiveU?
Yeah. So that gets a little bit back into the discussion of how do you do backhauls. There's probably a whole week or a whole session that could just be on cellular backhauls. And I do think that there's one thing that we don't cover enough, because I think we just get busy with the stuff that we do, is this kind of, I have a really basic setup. So I'm using a LiveU Solo or a MiFi or these other things, and I'm going to go out and stream. What does that look like, and how does that work? And I think that figuring that out would make or talking to that makes a lot of sense. Next comment.
Guy Cochran from Seattle, USA, behind the scenes newsroom edition.
Yeah. It's always hard to get into newsrooms. I mean, I think that's the hardest thing that we get ourselves into is newsrooms aren't usually excited about, because mostly if something goes wrong in any live network, if something goes wrong, having people listen to you sort it out is the best thing ever, but not something that you want to necessarily share. And so that's the challenge, with that process. So next question.
Håkan Fors from Stockholm, Sweden. vMix content, live graphics, automation. I could show my setup if you're interested.
Yeah, we would. We are interested. So reach out to us and let's talk about a second hour of that. And just in general, we haven't covered vMix enough. And there's a lot of people in our group that use vMix that are, I think that that's a little bit of a blind spot for us. And I think that we need to solve that. So definitely as we look at some of the IT versus cloud or whatever, wherever we fit that in, there's enough people using vMix in our community that we really should be doing more about talking through that. And so, I think that it's a blind spot for me because I don't use a lot of PCs in video production, and so as a result, I just don't see it as much. And I know that a lot of people do, and so I think it's important for us to, because I don't use vMix, I don't bring it up. So it's one of those things the team has to bring up, but I think that we have to get more aggressive about talking about vMix because it's a really powerful application for both in the cloud as well as just on-site production. Next comment.
Roscoe Jones from Madison, Indiana. An hour of power conditioning, generators, power walls, 3-phase, 240 volt. When to use a Cybertruck instead of a quiet Honda generator.
Well, the quiet Honda generators, by the way, are hard to get in California now because I guess you have to order them and have them sent to a friend in Reno and then drive them. So probably touched the third rail there. So anyway, I think that we just talked about power, but I think that we will keep on coming back to it because power is a huge challenge for putting this stuff together. So that's good. We just burned through those comments. We got the same number of comments that we got the other days. It's just that we didn't talk about them as much. So anyway, a lot of great comments in there. We're going to take those notes and put them into a format. Thank you for the whole week for the producers, for putting all these comments in because it really helps us think about not just what we want to do, but making sure that we're responsive to what you want us to do. So we'll do these every 3 to 6 months. You'll see us do these kind of brainstorming. The end of the year is a great one because we just finished a year. But we'll talk about are we going the right direction and what else could we be doing and what are your suggestions? And always know that in Discord, there is a second hour ideas. It's one of the things that I look at every single day. So don't think that that's not being that's a place that I look and I think about those and I put those into my little notes of okay, I got to figure out how to do those things. Especially when the other thing is if you see things in second hour suggestions in Discord, know that voting them up makes a big difference. Like voting up. Putting the thumbs up or whatever on those tells me that there's some heat there. If someone just puts one up and I'm not sure what it is or I'm not as interested in it and I go, well, we'll see what we can do. If I see 5, 6, 8, 10 thumbs up, we're paying a lot of attention to trying to figure that out. So that's between these sessions that we do, that's a really, really important place to keep on adding ideas because I definitely look at it every day trying to figure out. We have 260 slots for 2024 to fill. Almost exactly. I think it's exactly 260 slots to fill. And so we need all the help we can get. A reminder also is, reach out to us, myself or Josh. There are councils that work on each one of these days that meets every day. the Friday council meets for the Friday sessions. The Thursday, they each council meets once a week on the day that we just had, and we brainstorm about what to do next. And so, if you're interested in that, let us know, because if you're giving us suggestions, try to think about being on some of those councils to help us, brainstorm and think those out. And if you're bringing those things to it. It looks like we got a couple more suggestions coming in. We got a little time. Go ahead. What's the next suggestion?
Paul Wallace from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Can we have a rep for each time zone globally who promotes the after-hours conversation around the clock?
There's a bunch of other things we have to do with after hours first, so I probably wouldn't do that until we get that figured out. Next comment.
Stefan Fischer from Würzburg, Germany. What technical effort is still appropriate for the outcome? What's too much? What is the minimum?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this would be the right day to have those in the probably production conversation of when, because I think that one of the challenges that we get ourselves into is that that oftentimes we're adding things that we as the producers find interesting. It doesn't necessarily matter to the viewer, and so I think that those are, I mean, there's some things that, that again, we get into. Like, I've been in meetings where they're spending hours talking about the step and repeat, and all I can think of is, why don't we get rid of this? Like why don't, why are we still, my question is, why are we still using step and repeat? And so those are the, the kind of things like that. That's something that's very common, and it's a known thing, but it's not necessarily a good idea. So I think that talking through those, and I think questioning a lot of those things, I think would make sense. Next comment.
Paul Wallace back again from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Can we have a show on pre-show prep?
I think that for pre-show prep, if it's technical pre-show prep, then definitely on a Friday. If it's pre-show prep, of what we do in meetings, then it'd be more of a Monday session. So I think that it will, but I think both of those are definitely valid. All right. Thank you so much to the producers for all the great comments and all the great questions. And thanks to the panel for being here. It's can't do this without you. And it's really good conversation both in the first and the second hour. And thanks to the incredible crew on the back end that makes all of this happen. Everything from managing the graphics to the panelists as they come in, the editing, the questions, the RF. We have someone who just is writing down what's not working. so Gordon says they're writing down, this didn't work, this didn't, and that's how we move forward. So, but it really does take a small village every single day to get this thing off the ground, and we really appreciate the entire team, the dev team, the management team, the production teams. It's just really an amazing thing that we're doing, and we can't do that without any of you. So we really appreciate your contribution. We traveled 104,000 miles, 167,000 kilometers, and that is 825 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours.
Finally found my banana from NAB.
I had a bunch of bananas. I had a bunch of Fenwick bananas, and then I keep on. What happens is that I put them away when Michael comes over, and then I can't remember where I put them away.
Hide the bananas.
I don't want to try to explain them. I don't want to try to explain a banana to Michael Krasny. That's the bottom line. I was like, why do you have a banana on your desk?
Put a yellow label on there that says for scale, and that's it.
My brother-in-law is here, and he came into my office, and he looked at all the stuff at the switchers and the lights, and he just pointed at the banana and said, "What?
Tell him to camera calibration tool."
But what's funny is that if you know anybody from Reddit and you talk about that, like, oh, that's funny. Like, I get it. So anyway, all right, see you guys.